In the 52 days since Nancy Guthrie went missing, the shocking abduction of Savannah's mom has brought renewed attention.
I mean, paramount through all of this, Savannah and her family are top.
Interestingly, this man, we blurred his face, but he has a goatee.
We were talking about the sheriff. So he's changed his messaging again on whether there's a threat to the community in a way that I would argue seems to undermine that this is a stalker, that this is an NBC News stalker or family member.
That on today.com. The vice president says donations like the one from the Guthrie family will go.
It piles pain upon pain. And no one took better care.
Stop scrolling. Because what just leaked might completely destroy everything you thought you knew about this case. This isn't just another update. This is a warning. Because just hours ago, a message allegedly sent by Tommaso Cioni was quietly posted and then just as quickly deleted. But not before people saw it. Not before screenshots started spreading. And what he said about Hoda Kotb, it wasn't subtle. It wasn't professional. It was a direct threat. A message that sounded less like anger and more like panic. Because according to what's now being exposed, Hoda may not have just been reporting on Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. She may have been connected to it, deeply connected, in ways that were never meant to be public. And if that sounds unbelievable, just wait. Because insiders are now claiming the situation has been building behind the scenes for weeks. Quietly, carefully, until something slipped, something got out. And now the narrative is starting to crack. The question is no longer what happened to Nancy. The real question is, who was controlling the story all along? And why is Tommaso suddenly trying to shut it down? To really understand why the situation is exploding right now, you have to go back to the moment everything started to feel wrong. Not suspicious, not obvious, just off. Because when Nancy Guthrie first disappeared, the story didn't hit like a typical breaking case. There was no immediate chaos, no loud media frenzy, no desperate, round-the-clock coverage. Instead, there was silence, controlled, measured, almost too calm for something this serious. An 84-year-old woman vanishes without a trace, and yet the reaction felt delayed, filtered, like pieces of the story were being held back. And that's where the first layer of this mystery begins. Because behind that calm surface, investigators were already dealing with something far more complicated than they were letting on. The timeline didn't add up. Footage surfaced, but not all of it. Witness accounts existed, but many of them never made it to major broadcasts. And the more people started paying attention, the more it felt like two completely different stories were unfolding at the same time. One for the public, and one behind closed doors. That's exactly when Hoda Kotb stepped in. At first, everything about her coverage seemed normal, professional, sympathetic, carefully delivered. She spoke about Nancy with concern, with empathy, with the kind of tone you expect from someone covering a sensitive case. But then, people started noticing something strange. It wasn't what she was saying. It was how she was saying it. The pauses, the emphasis on certain details. The way some questions were completely avoided while others were repeated again and again. And slowly, a pattern began to form. A pattern that didn't feel accidental. Because while other outlets were chasing every possible lead, every rumor, every angle, Hoda's coverage stayed locked into one very specific narrative. Clean, simple, controlled, almost like the story had already been decided. At first, most people ignored it. After all, she's a respected figure, a trusted voice, someone who has built her career on credibility. But in cases like this, it's not the obvious things that raise suspicion. It's the small ones, the details that don't quite fit, the moments that feel just a little too rehearsed. And then came the interviews, carefully selected guests, experts who all seem to agree, voices that reinforce the same version of events without ever challenging it. No contradictions. No real pushback, just a steady, controlled flow of information. That's when online communities started asking questions. Not loud at first, just quiet discussions, threads, comments, people comparing clips, rewatching segments, looking for something they couldn't quite explain. And then a new name entered the conversation. A name nobody expected. Tommaso Cioni. Unlike Hoda, Tommaso wasn't a public-facing personality. He wasn't on television. He wasn't giving interviews. He wasn't part of the official investigation, at least not in any way the public could see. But according to multiple anonymous sources, he was close enough to know things, not rumors, not guesses, information, the kind of information that doesn't get released, the kind that stays behind the scenes. And that's what made his presence so unsettling. Because insiders claimed Tommaso had been quietly tracking developments in this case long before it became a national headline. No public statements, no online activity, nothing that would draw attention until recently. And that's where everything begins to shift. Because just days before that alleged threatening message surfaced, something else started spreading. Not on mainstream platforms, not on major news networks, but in smaller, harder to track spaces online. Private forums, closed groups, encrypted discussions. The kind of places where stories surface before they're ready to be seen. The claim that Nancy Guthrie wasn't just living a quiet, private life. That there were layers to her situation, connections that hadn't been made public. And at the center of those whispers was a word that changed everything. Handler. At first, it sounded like pure speculation. The kind of theory people create when they don't have answers. But then, details started appearing. Patterns, timelines, fragments of information that, when placed together, painted a picture that was hard to ignore. And slowly, one name kept coming up, again and again. Hoda Kotb. Suddenly, the conversation shifted. It wasn't just about Nancy anymore. It wasn't even just about her disappearance. It became about control, about influence, about who was shaping the narrative, and why. Because if even a fraction of these claims were true, then this wasn't just a missing persons case. This was something far more complex. Something that had been hidden in plain sight. And that's exactly when things started to spiral. Because once that connection began circulating, it didn't stay quiet for long. Screenshots started appearing. Clips were reanalyzed. Old statements were pulled apart word by word. And right in the middle of all of it, Tommaso Cioni finally made a move. Not a public statement, not an interview, something far more aggressive, something that wasn't meant to be seen. But once it was, there was no taking it back. And what that message contained didn't just raise questions. It changed the entire direction of the story. Everything changed the moment that message leaked. Not a rumor, not speculation, a direct message, allegedly sent by Tommaso Cioni. And within minutes of its surfacing, people knew this wasn't just another online drama. This was serious. Because the tone of that message, it wasn't defensive. It wasn't calm. It was aggressive, calculated, and disturbingly personal. According to multiple screenshots now circulating, the message appeared to be sent late at night, time-stamped just after 2:17 a.m., the kind of time when people don't carefully craft statements. They react, they slip, they say things they weren't supposed to say. And that's exactly what made this message so dangerous. Because instead of denying the rumors, Tommaso went straight for a warning, a threat. The message reportedly read, "You should have never said anything. You don't understand what you've just started. Fix it or I will." Short, direct, no explanation, no context. But the moment people connected it to Hoda Kotb, everything exploded. Because now the question wasn't just about Nancy anymore. It was about what exactly Hoda had said. What did she leak? What did she expose that triggered this kind of reaction? And why did Tommaso sound like someone who was trying to contain damage instead of denying it? Within hours, social media went into overdrive. Clips of Hoda's recent segments started resurfacing. People slowed them down, zoomed in, replayed specific moments over and over again. And that's when they found it. A moment that lasted less than 5 seconds. But now, it was being called the biggest mistake in the entire case. During a recent broadcast, while discussing Nancy's timeline, Hoda briefly paused and then said something that didn't match the official narrative. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable. But once you hear it, you can't unhear it. She referred to Nancy not just as a victim, but as someone who was being managed, not protected, not assisted, managed. And right after saying it, she corrected herself. Quickly, too quickly, as if she realized what she had just revealed. At the time, most viewers didn't catch it. But now, with the alleged threat from Tommaso circulating, that one word changed everything, because it aligned perfectly with the rumors that had been spreading in private communities. The idea that Nancy wasn't alone, that someone was controlling aspects of her life, and that somehow Hoda knew about it, maybe more than she was supposed to. And that's where the first major twist hits. Because just when people thought this was about a single leaked message, a second piece of evidence surfaced. This time it wasn't a message. It was an image, blurry, low quality, but clear enough to recognize two figures standing outside what appeared to be a residential property. One of them matched Nancy's description. The other? That's where things got complicated. Because according to users analyzing the image frame by frame, the second figure appeared to resemble someone from television, someone familiar, the posture, the build, even the way they were standing. And within hours, people started making the connection. They believed it was Hoda, standing near Nancy, days before the disappearance. Now, officially, this image hasn't been verified. There's no confirmed timestamp, no confirmed location, nothing that law enforcement has publicly acknowledged. But that didn't stop the internet. Because in cases like this, perception spreads faster than facts. And the timing? That's what made it even worse. Because this image surfaced just after Tommaso's alleged threat, which made it feel less like coincidence and more like something slipping out, something that wasn't supposed to be seen, something that connected dots people weren't meant to connect. And suddenly, the narrative shifted completely. This wasn't just about a missing person anymore. This wasn't even just about media coverage. This was about potential involvement, possible control, and a connection that no one saw coming. But it doesn't stop there, because as investigators and online analysts started digging deeper, they found something else. Something buried in plain sight. Old footage, archive segments, interviews that had already aired but never questioned. And in multiple clips, Hoda seemed to reference details that hadn't been released publicly yet. Specific timings, specific behaviors, information that, according to official reports, shouldn't have been available at that stage. Which raises a dangerous question. How did she know? Was it coincidence? Was it good reporting? Or was it something else entirely? Because when you combine that with the managed slip, with the alleged threat from Tommaso, and now this mysterious image, you don't just have a controversy, you have a pattern. A pattern that suggests something much bigger is happening behind scenes. And if that pattern is real, then this case is about to take a turn no one is ready for. Because right now, one thing is becoming impossible to ignore. Tommaso isn't trying to clear his name. He's trying to stop something from coming out. And whatever that something is, it hasn't fully surfaced yet, but it's getting closer. And if the next leak confirms what people are starting to believe, then this entire story is about to explode in a way no one can control. The moment those leaks started circulating, everything spiraled out of control. Not slowly, not quietly, instantly, within hours. Social media turned into a battlefield. Hashtags exploded. Clips went viral. And the name Hoda Kotb was suddenly trending for all the wrong reasons. Some people defended her, saying this was taken out of context, a misunderstanding, a coincidence blown out of proportion. But others, they weren't buying it. Not anymore. Because now there were too many pieces lining up. Too many mistakes. Too many moments that didn't make sense. And then the reaction started coming in, not from random accounts, from verified names, influencers, media insiders, even a few celebrities who have been quietly following the case. One viral post read, "If that managed slip wasn't a mistake, then we've all been watching the wrong story this entire time." Another one hit even harder. Why is no one asking how a journalist knew details before investigators released them? And just like that, the pressure shifted. It wasn't just about Nancy anymore. It became about trust, about media control, about who's telling the truth and who's hiding it. But the real shock came when an alleged internal audio clip surfaced. At first, people thought it was fake, edited, AI generated. But then more copies started appearing. Different sources, same audio, same voices. And that's when everything changed. Because in that clip, reportedly recorded during a private off-air conversation, a female voice, believed by many to be Hoda, can be heard saying something that sent chills to the entire internet. They weren't supposed to connect her to that. Not yet. Not yet. Those two words alone were enough to send the entire narrative into chaos. Because it didn't sound like confusion. It didn't sound like reporting. It sounded like planning, like timing mattered, like information was being controlled. And then a second voice enters the clip. Calm, lower, more direct. A voice that some users are now claiming could be Tommaso. And what he says next, that's what turned this from a controversy into a full-blown scandal. You said you had it handled. Handled? That same word again. Now repeated. Now confirmed, at least in the eyes of the public. And suddenly, everything started connecting in a way that felt impossible to ignore. The slip during the broadcast, the leaked message, the image, and now this audio. Individually, maybe they meant nothing, but together, they painted a picture people couldn't unsee. And the internet reacted exactly how you'd expect. Some called it proof. Others called it manipulation. But one thing was clear. No one was looking at this case the same way anymore. Because if that audio is real, then this isn't just about a disappearance. This is about something that was being controlled from the inside. And right now, that control is starting to break. But here's the problem. Because just as fast as that audio spread, something else happened. Something quiet. Something almost unnoticed. The original posts started disappearing. Accounts went silent. Clips got taken down. And people began asking the one question that made this even more disturbing. Who is trying to clean this up, and why? At this point, the story was no longer under control. Not by the media, not by investigators, not by anyone. Because the moment those clips and that audio hit the internet, the reaction was instant and completely divided. On one side, you had people defending Hoda, loyal viewers, industry insiders, even a few media personalities who came forward, calling the entire situation a dangerous overreaction. One prominent anchor posted, "This is exactly how misinformation spreads." A few edited clips, and suddenly people are rewriting reality. Others echoed the same sentiment, saying the audio couldn't be verified, that the voice wasn't clear, that people were connecting dots that didn't exist. But on the other side, it was a completely different story. Because critics weren't just questioning Hoda anymore. They were accusing her of knowing more than she admitted, of shaping the narrative, of being too close to something she was supposed to be reporting on. And that's when things turned ugly, because now it wasn't just debates. It was attacks. Full-blown digital warfare. Comment sections flooded. Live streams analyzing every second of her past coverage. Threads breaking down her words, frame by frame, like investigators try and crack a code. One viral post gained millions of views, saying, either she slipped or she got caught. And that line, it spread everywhere, fueling even more suspicion, even more anger. But the industry reaction, that's where things got even more tense. Because behind the scenes, reports started surfacing that major networks were quietly discussing the situation. Not publicly, not officially, but internally. Producers, executives, legal teams, all trying to figure out the same thing. How big is this? And more importantly, how bad could it get? Some insiders claim emergency meetings were held. Segments were reviewed. Future coverage was being reconsidered. Because if the situation escalated any further, it wouldn't just affect one person. It could impact the credibility of the entire network. And then came another twist. Because while all this chaos was happening publicly, something very different was happening behind closed doors. According to multiple anonymous sources, certain high-profile figures were being advised to stay silent. No comments, no opinions, no involvement, which only made things look worse. Because silence in situations like this, it doesn't calm things down. It makes people suspicious. It makes them wonder what's being hidden and why no one wants to speak. Meanwhile, Nancy Guthrie's name, once the center of the story, was now being pulled into something even bigger, because people weren't just asking where she was anymore. They were asking what role she played in all of this. Was she just a victim, or was she part of something no one understood yet? And that question split the internet completely. Some refused to believe any of it, calling it disrespectful, dangerous, a distraction from finding the truth. But others, they believed this was the truth finally coming out. Messy, uncontrolled, but real. And right now, the line between fact and theory is getting harder to see, because the more people dig, the more complicated this story becomes. And the deeper it goes, the more it feels like this isn't just a controversy anymore. It's something much bigger, something that hasn't fully surfaced yet. And if the next piece of information confirms even a fraction of what people are starting to believe, then this entire situation is about to reach a level no one can walk back from. Just when it felt like the situation couldn't get any more unstable, it did. And this time, there was no going back. Because late at night, when most of the internet was still debating, arguing, and dissecting every detail, something unexpected happened. A new file appeared online. No warning, no source, just dropped. And within minutes, it spread everywhere. At first, people thought it was another fake leak, another edited clip, another attempt to fuel the chaos. But then they opened it, and everything went silent, because this wasn't just a message. It wasn't just audio. It was a compilation. Dozens of pages, screenshots, private notes, fragments of conversations that, if real, changed the entire direction of the case. And at the center of it all was a single repeated phrase: "Do not let her speak before clearance." That line alone triggered panic online, because it wasn't emotional. It wasn't accidental. It sounded procedural, controlled, like instructions, not opinions. And then came the second shock. A folder inside the leak labeled only as NG final status. Inside it, a document, short, cold, disturbingly simple. Subject relocated. Media containment active. Further exposure to be minimized. Relocated. Not missing. Not lost. Relocated. And that one word shattered everything people thought they knew. Because if this was real, then the entire narrative had been something else from the beginning. Not a disappearance. Not confusion. But control. And that's when the internet completely broke. Some users claimed it was fabricated. Others said it was the biggest cover-up they had ever seen. But what made it worse was what happened next. Because within hours of the leak spreading, it started disappearing. Posts deleted. Accounts suspended. Threads wiped. Almost like someone was actively trying to erase it from existence. And that only fueled one question louder than everything else. Who has the power to clean this up this fast? Meanwhile, both Hoda Kotb and Tommaso Cioni had gone completely silent. No statements, no appearances, nothing. And silence in a situation like this felt louder than any denial. Then, just as the internet was trying to process everything, a final 10-second clip surfaced. No context, no explanation, just audio. A woman's voice, shaky, distant, saying, "If this gets out, they won't stop it." And then static. End of clip. No confirmation, no source, no verification. But it didn't matter anymore, because whether real or not, the damage was done. And now the biggest question of all hangs in the air. Was this just a case of misinterpretation? Or was something truly hidden behind the story from day one? And even more terrifying, if this is only what has leaked so far, what hasn't been seen yet, before you leave this video, ask yourself one thing. Is this really just a misunderstanding? Or are we watching something being carefully controlled in real time? Because every leak, every silence, and every sudden disappearance of information is pointing towards something bigger than anyone expected. And if even half of this is true, then the real story hasn't even fully come out yet. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Do you think this is a cover-up, or just internet chaos gone too far? And most importantly, what do you think the next leak will reveal? Stay alert, because this story is far from over.